See?
Thank you so much. Welcome JCI USA members and JCI Michigan members. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, JCI Michigan, for hosting this Launchpad to Leadership event. It's something that is very important that our leaders have the tools necessary to be able to bring us into the next decade and the next century. So thank you very much, JCI Michigan, for hosting. For those of you who don't know, my name is Cassandra or Cassie Van Gompel. I am presently your 2026 parliamentarian. I've also served as 2024 legal counsel for JCI USA as well as 2025 chief of staff. For a little bit of background, legal counsel for JCI USA runs our elections committee. And we revised how we handled it my year. Some of these bylaws changes that you're going to be hearing about have been recently updated, and I can talk to you a little bit more about elections committee ideas and things like that if you're interested at the end. So today we'll be focusing mostly on the candidate school. So we'll be talking about parliamentary procedure, which is how we're going to run meetings, understanding your bylaws and policies, as well as how to basically run for election in a legal way so that you can actually get elected. So we are going to do a brief, we're just going to explain why this is important. First is if you are not aware of the rules, it's going to be very hard to follow them. And if you don't follow the rules, there can be disqualification, which means you could end up not being able to run for a position that you would like to. Also, these rules are put in place well before the election to make sure that it's fair and consistent. Um, why we do that is because if we keep changing the rules based on who's running, then it's not really ensuring that we are getting candidates that the majority of people want. It's that we're getting candidates that the people who set the rules want, which isn't necessarily representative of our membership. It signals to delegates that you're ready to lead the organization. So it's really hard if you are running for election and you cannot follow the rules to convince people that as a leader in this organization, you will follow the rules, that you will make sure that every voice is heard, that the finances are handled correctly, and things like that. And then also, because the elections committee has to make sure that this is handled fairly, they have to rigidly enforce all bylaws, policies, and election rules. So, um, what some governing documents are. So, a little bit of background. So, everyone enters JCI at a local level. The majority of our members do. So that will be what we call your chapter, your local chapter. That can have different geographical locations depending on your organization. Sometimes it's a city, sometimes it's a county, sometimes it's an area or greater area. Then we have JCI state, which would be usually set up by the state. Not all local chapters need to be enrolled in a state organization, and there is specific bylaws about how to form a state organization. If you are one of those chapters, but you would like to form a state, there's an opportunity for that. And they have their own set of basically how they run their events. We have JCI USA, which is what I'll be talking most about today, which we have our own bylaws and our executive committee. American Development Council is kind of between us and JCI. They basically are making sure that we will increase membership and training opportunities within the Americas, which includes North America, South America. So basically the entire Western Hemisphere. And then there's JCI, which is our international level. So I think that it was discussed at the last meeting, but just understand that each level has their own elections, bylaws, policies, and rules. So you want to make sure, depending on what you're running, that you're reviewing the right rules. So what somebody might have as rules for North Carolina might be different than the rules that I have here in Wisconsin for your elections. So if what I'm telling you doesn't sound familiar, just make sure that you're reviewing your bylaws to address that. So here's kind of the hierarchy of governing documents. So your articles of incorporation is basically what you usually file in your state to become a not-for-profit organization. I think one of our members was recently asking about basically how they go about getting them. So for us, it's our Department of Financial Institutions. Other states, it's their Secretary of State. And this is why a lot of times when chapters reach out to legal counsel to ask questions about how to get things, like we can't always help you because each state runs things differently. So your articles of incorporation are what made you a not-for-profit. Your bylaw, your bylaws would be your core governing documents. They're a lot of the structure that goes along with it. It doesn't usually get changed as frequently as policies and procedures. And it's something that will be kind of your guiding light over the other items. Policies and procedures. So, for example, in JCI USA, that can be done by the board of directors, which consists of your executive committee and your state board members. Basically, it could be your state president, it could be your chief delegate, depending on your state setup. But those are more of like, how do we pay for things? What are our rules of conduct? Things like that. And then we have our election rules and regulations, which are formulated and enforced by the elections committee based on the board of directors. So those are the things that we'll be talking a lot about today. Your organization may have other documents. I've seen a few other states' bylaws where they've had like other organizations that also are under their JCI chapter that have bylaws. For example, certain events may have different rules about purchasing and contracts and things like that. So this is not all encompassing, but is a general idea of some of the documents you might be looking at. So we're going to open this up to the chat. So why should potential candidates be familiar with their bylaws, policies, and election rules? So if you want to put something in the chat or raise your hand so we can get some insight on why this might be important. Or if you have some fun stories about a time someone didn't know their bylaws, policies, or election rules, I'm sure we've had those as well.
I'll take JCI Michigan prerogative and start calling names. So then I'll be quiet. I know that governing laws and policies aren't everyone's favorite cup of tea, but you're all here to learn. So what do you want to learn?
Looks like Bobby Joe has got her hand up. So Bobby Joe, go ahead.
Well, I think mainly to kind of put some bullet points in there. I think like, it ensures, I think you hit point on a few things earlier. It ensures like fairness and like the integrity going through the process and like, knowing our responsibilities as candidates, like during and after elections and like avoiding accidental violations that come, right? Like if you don't know them and something comes up and you're like, oh, shoot, I wasn't aware of that. I should have been more aware or taken the time to read that. And it more or less helps us with like informed decisions and like understanding like what those expectations are within the position like we're trying to seek or hopefully follow through with. And I don't know, I feel like it helps like us being more prepared with professionalism and like
Perfect.
following those rules.
Yep. Thank you, Bobby Joe. And DeMarcus?
Part of myself actually remembered to unmute myself, but I think it's important to be familiar with bylaws and policies because, plain and simple, how can you lead an organization if you're not familiar with the rules and policies of operations?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Marcus. We have DMP Aaron says it's the primary governance of our organization. Also, as an elected officer, we take an oath to adhere and lead using them as our guide, which is a very important point. For those of you that have listened to someone be sworn in, it's using the policies and bylaws and policies as our guide. If you're going to follow them. So if you're going to take that oath or hope to take that oath, you should probably know what you're taking an oath for. If you don't know the policies and bylaws, you cannot adhere and effectively lead your executive team. That's from Christy. Megan, SP Megan says, helps you know how to run elections with who can run for certain positions. That's a very good point. And can create violations unintentionally if you don't know them. So I want to talk a little bit about what SP Megan said, which is knowing who can run for certain positions. That should be your first thing if you want to run for election. I can tell you I've been a part of more than one election where someone has tried to run for a position they cannot run for. Some bylaws or policies say you need to be a member for this long, or you need to have served in this position or this many roles prior to running for this position. And so if you have spent a lot of time and thought of running for office and you don't end up qualifying, that is not necessarily good luck. The other thing that I would say about like knowing the bylaws and policies is like to know what you're running for, right? Some chapters, like for example, my chapter, like our secretary takes the minutes, but other chapters, the secretary also needs to make the reservations for the meeting space. The secretary also sends out the newsletter, right? So if you don't even know the responsibilities for your position, it's going to be very hard for you to run for that position because you're not even going to be familiar enough to talk about those issues that your constituents might want to know. How familiar are you with making a newsletter? Do you have any experience with that? And you can really tailor your campaign to those criteria if you're more familiar with your policies or bylaws than others. So JCI USA. So again, we'll talk about mostly JCI USA since we're all part of JCI USA. However, if you're running for a state office or a local office, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with their bylaws as well. So there is a ton of references to the policies and bylaws. I will tell you that Michelle has indicated that the slides will be available shortly after this presentation. So don't need to like write them down, and I'm not going to like read them verbatim. I need to get into like spoken word poetry or something to make that a little bit more exciting. But basically, the nice part about JCI USA is we have our bylaws and our policies kind of parallel each other. So Article 7 of the bylaws talks about the bylaws criteria for elections and policy section number 7. So they're both in section number 7. We tried to make it a little bit more user-friendly for that. Yes, thank you very much. And the recording will also be available. So if you're looking for just generally election stuff, section 7 in your bylaws and policies is a good example, but other states have it run differently. And we have an election packet that gets released by the elections committee, which kind of spells out a lot of these basic qualities, but you are still responsible for knowing what's in the policies and bylaws, not necessarily just reading that. So again, it's not that you will have them memorized. That is a big misconception that people have is people will ask me questions. I don't have everything memorized. I have reviewed, I don't know how many bylaws at this point. And yep, I'll get to that, Kurt. So like it's okay that you're checking them. I will not lie to you. I literally have the policies and bylaws pulled up on one of my other screens right now, so that if you guys ask me a question, I can pull it up because I don't have them memorized. But you should be able to know how and where to find those answers. So that's why we're going to use them as an example. So SP Kurt asked, what if a chapter doesn't have / lost their bylaws? That's a great question, Kurt. It happens quite a bit. So step 1 is, again, seeing if your organization has submitted them to any other group recently. For example, if you have like board insurance, sometimes it's required that you had submitted your policies and bylaws to that insurance company. So you can reach out to that insurance company to get a copy of what was submitted in a prior year. Obviously trying to check your own like records and documents, whether that's your Google Drive, your storage unit, things like that. Reaching out to your Senate as well and trying to find the most recent version that your Senate has, if that's available. And then also, like I said, if you're checking with your Secretary of State or your organization where the articles of incorporation were submitted, sometimes they'll have that. Otherwise, you basically have to start from scratch and pass new bylaws, which again can get really tricky with the state, depending on the state that you're in, because a lot of times if you're going to, you may have to reincorporate as a different like organization with a different FEIN number. in order to do that. So it depends on your state, the best way to go about that. If you've really lost them and you've exhausted all other options about how to find them through other means, I would say to reach out to like your local law school or the bar association. I can tell you that like in Wisconsin, we have one of our law schools does a clinic for nonprofits, and they can actually help different organizations with that. So sometimes the law schools will be able to give free legal advice. Or the state bar will have free or reduced legal advice for nonprofits. Some lawyers will offer that service. So those would be the best advice I can give you depending on your state. Okay, so for the elections committee, there's 5 members that are appointed by the national president and confirmed by the executive committee. No state may have more than 1 member on the committee, and that member has to be no member from a state recommending a presidential or deputy national presidential candidate. So just as an example, President Josh was from Delaware. When he ran for president, there could not be a member from Delaware that was serving on the election committee. No board member or chief delegates, so that includes the state presidents, or if they have a state representative, can serve. That's mostly because they're going to have direct votes per the bylaws. And then no member directly related by blood, marriage, or legal status to any declared candidate. And then also, really, they have the authority to interpret and enforce all election rules. And if you aren't happy with that, then you can appeal that to the board, but that decision is final. So the difference between how we had been running it prior to me being legal counsel is that legal counsel did make most of the decisions, and the elections committee really just acted at convention to enforce rules at convention, versus when I took over as legal counsel, we actually had the members of the election committee review the materials throughout the summer to ensure that like the posters met the criteria, that the candidate's paperwork was filled out correctly, and they had provided all the items required under our bylaws and policies. Just because I think it is, number one, a better experience for our members to be involved in the process instead of some lawyer telling people what to do. It's a learning experience for everybody. Also, I think that it diffuses power so that it's not just legal counsel deciding who can and can't run. So if you are interested, I believe that we have a full amount, or we have 4 at least of the 5. So if you are interested for this year and you want to reach out to your state president to recommend you to President Josh for an appointment, or if you're interested in the future, just be aware that they start making these requests around April, so we can approve them at our spring meeting, which we won't have next year, but no, it's around April to get on for next year. Some important provisions that will provide written notice that we have these upcoming elections, that the nominations will be filled with written recommendations of the state's candidate state organization. So that means that basically there's like a letter from your state president that we get when you are nominated, and that state organization has to be current with all financial obligations to the national organization. So this is just one of those things that we have to make sure that the state organizations are paying their fees. And so we say that if they're not in compliance with that, that we won't acknowledge candidates from that state because that state's not in good standing. So if that is an issue for you, make sure that your state's addressing that with JCI USA. Then you have to pay for your filing fees to cover your filing fees and your damage deposits, which we'll talk about in a second. And if we don't have enough people running for a position, then late nominations can be accepted up to an hour fixed by the executive committee. So we have done this in the past. We've set a deadline for anybody that is running just to avoid, it's just a lot of work of like meeting with the candidates ahead of time, approving their materials. So we have to set a deadline, because otherwise if someone declares from the floor, then we haven't had the chance to make sure that we've done the appropriate paperwork to make sure that they can qualify. So president, it's minimum of 2 candidates, deputy national president as well, and then vice president's minimum of 12 candidates before we can set that we can set that deadline if we haven't met that by the time we get to annual meeting. So the filing fees, there's your individual filing fees as well as the damage deposit. The damage deposit does get returned to you, assuming that you did not cause any damage. And there's also a spending limit. I did have to double check this because when I saw $75,000 after January 1st, I was like, that has to be 7,500, right? But apparently we have set it at $75,000, which means that if you want to blow a year's worth of salary to run for national president, you can be my guest. But it does include the cost of shipping materials to the convention site. The national vice president, that $5,000 sneaks up on you pretty quickly, honestly. If you're going to be campaigning in other states, you have to include your travel, your hotel, your rental car, all that stuff. So $5,000 sneaks up on you pretty fast. Plus, I believe your convention registration needs to be counted as well. Again, you can look at the bylaws and policies for that. But $5,000 seems like a lot, but when you have to include all of that, it's very expensive. For example, all travel costs need to be included, but shipping items does not. And I believe the other thing I would say, maybe I don't have a slide for this, but I think that if you have your institute pays for the fees, you still need to disclose that because it was spent as a part of your campaign. You just attribute that to your institute. So, but check the bylaws as necessary. There are some pretty big timelines for this. So we have our elections process. I believe that the guide has been sent. JCI Michigan begins in July, so you guys are just ramping up to that. The earliest formal announcement date for president and deputy national president is 120 days before annual meeting, and national vice president candidates can be 90 days before annual meeting. So just walking you through the process. So deciding to run, I'm going to put a big asterisk on this because I think that this is the part that often people do not spend enough time on. Deciding to run is a big deal. This is a large time commitment that you're committing to. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in a position, talking to the person who has that position right now, because there's a lot more work than you think. For example, when I did chief of staff, I thought that I was going to be doing one thing, and it turned out I had to run a big convention. So knowing that going in so that you can make sure that you have the capacity and the skills necessary to run that position is very important. And then you can build your platform, decide why you want to run and how you're going to sell people on that, and then choose a campaign team if you would like to basically just get a second set of eyes on your ideas. Then nomination and certification. So make sure that you're filling out your paperwork completely, paying your fees, getting your nominations, and receiving your certification from the elections committee, which usually is just an email that says that you're certified as a candidate, and you can announce after receiving that email, but you cannot announce until the elections committee has said that you're good as a candidate. Then you can announce your candidacy. I know people do that in a variety of different ways. Making Facebook groups is pretty popular right now. Note that there is a policy, I believe, that talks about how you basically can't use, at least for JCI USA, your glue up access. You can't use any of our official listservs or WhatsApp groups. Part of that is because if somebody is running, let's just say as a state president, they have access to a lot more information on glue up versus somebody who might be running that was a prior state president and doesn't have that access. And so that's to keep things at the middle ground. And also, we just don't want our members being inundated by emails for different campaigns. So if somebody gives you their email, or you collect that a different way, but it can't be through JCI USA's official lists as well. So check out the bylaws for that. You can visit other organizations. So if you're running for state office and you want to visit other chapters, you can visit other organizations. You can visit other chapters. You can visit other organizations. You can visit other chapters. You can visit other organizations. You can visit other chapters. You can visit other organizations. 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 You can visit other organiza JCI USA, a lot of times candidates will visit state organization meetings or trainings that you can also host meet the candidate events. And then when we get into the formal items, we have candidate forum, which is where the candidates all speak, candidate tabling, which is available at a lot of our conventions, and then the election itself. So some key campaign rules. If you have audiovisual materials that has to be submitted to the elections chair set by the deadline, that is because if it's a video and things like that, we need to have time to watch it to make sure that it conveys all of the appropriate rules. All purchase candidate material to be distributed must be sent to legal counsel 10 days before. So I can tell you as legal counsel, I got a lot of like Canva stuff sent to me before they made the purchase, because if you make the purchase and it doesn't comport with the rules, then we won't let you distribute it. And so it's just money that you spent for nothing. So I would highly recommend not waiting till the 10 days or waiting till it's been purchased. You can send that like screenshot of what you were working on to legal counsel, because if there's any issues, you'd rather get that fixed before the purchase is made and the shipping's done. Only approved emails can be used for campaign solicitation. We discussed that already. All campaign materials must identify you as a candidate. This is just to avoid confusion as to current roles versus future roles, and must not include the JCI USA logo, shield, or trademark symbols. That one happens all the time. Also, like when we do the forums and things like that, you're not supposed to have JCI branded like lapel pins or cufflinks, ties, any of that stuff. Because again, at that point in time, you are a candidate, you are not appearing on JCI USA's behalf. Executive committee members cannot formally endorse any candidate during their years of service. Again, this is to just avoid people reaching out to executive committee members or the executive committee picking the next year's team. Executive committee members are still allowed to have personal preferences, but they cannot formally endorse any candidate while they are serving in that role. And candidates have a set curfew at the annual meeting. And if you're part of the elections committee, you probably have a story about door knocking at midnight or 11 o'clock, whatever it is, to make sure that people are in their rooms at the right time. So at the annual meeting, we do a candidate forum. We also usually do an online forum as well. That's been run by different organizations over the years. And I think we as JCI USA have been running it the last 2 or 3 years to allow people who might need to be on Zoom. But we also have one the day before the election at annual meeting where candidates deliver a speech. MVP candidates get a minute introduction by their state president, 2 minutes to address members. And then there's 2 questions from the forum moderator. 1-minute responses, as I think it got cut off. But then DNP has 8 minutes for introduction and promotion. They can have a video if they would like. The past national presidents ask questions, which means it's kind of depends on how many national presidents, past national presidents we have present, how many questions that would be. And then 2 minutes per answer. And then usually we've given the past national presidents 1 question each for each candidate. And then for presidential candidates, it's 12 minutes, including your introduction and your video or your speech. And then you go through Q&A with the past national presidents. So it is a fun thing to watch if you have not watched it before. And I'm sure I can speak for the candidates that have done it. It's very stressful because you don't know what questions are going to get asked, but it also teaches you a lot about thinking on your feet and making sure that you have answers to a lot of anticipated questions, because a lot of the questions should be anticipated. Like, for example, how is JCI USA going to adapt to changing demographics over the next few years? How are we going to modernize? Things like that are usually discussed. Then it comes down to voting. Each state organization is entitled to 5 base votes plus 1 vote per 2 local chapters in good standing. and 1 vote per 100 individual members. Nearest rounded to the nearest 100. Your state president or proxy casts 50% plus 1. So for example, if there are 10 votes that you have available, then the state president will get to cast 6 of them, and then you would have 4 other votes amongst your certified delegates. And then voting strength is based on the average of the 2 most recent year-end membership figures. States with illegally certified delegates lose 25% of their vote allotment for all ballots that meeting. I don't think I put a slide in here about certification, but how certification works is we basically need to make sure that you are a member and that you are of age and that you are there. So we will usually set a time that is for certification. And when it comes to that, you need to show up with your ID. If there's, let's just say 20 members that are there, if you have 20 votes, 10 of that will go to your state president, and then you'd have 10 plus 1, so 11 will go to your state president. That means you usually have 9 other delegates. And then the certification committee will pick a percentage every year. So they'll say, we want to certify 60% of our delegates, which means that of those 9 other people that we would need to have, oh my God, I'm going to do math in the spot, but basically like 6 of those would have to come in and get certified and show their ID. So number 1, know when your certification time is. Number 2, know if you're a delegate that needs to get certified by talking to your state president. So that's that. What's the average percentage that's usually selected? I'd say it's around 60. It kind of depends. If everything is not contested, I think the credentialing committee usually suggests 60%, 60. If it's a contested race or contested like bylaws or something like that, they will sometimes up it to 70 to 75%. But ultimately, the credentialing committee sets the percentage. So that is up to the credentialing committee, which is a different committee. If you are looking for something to do, I served on the credentialing committee. I will shamelessly plug this for Treasurer Eric or whoever heads up the credentialing committee, that it's a good one to get started with. You get to, usually there's one meeting before annual meeting to talk about the credentialing rules and just to kind of walk you through the process. Then there's a meeting at annual meeting where you pick the number that you're going to certify and kind of just walk through the process of how certification looks. And then you work during that about hour and a half during certification, checking IDs, checking people in glue up, checking birth dates. And then there's a report that is issued on that. We have a comment. I've served on credentialing the last 2 years, and it is a great, quote, get your feet wet, low stakes opportunity. Highly recommend. Yes. I can tell you of all of the committees that people have served on, like credentialing, a lot of people who end up higher up in this organization have served in credentialing because it gives you that insider access to our bylaws and policies and how that's done. And also it's just a great networking opportunity because, I know President PNP Vanessa has like a picture of her in a credentialing committee. And I think like 3 out of the 5 all ended up serving as like national officers, which is super cool. So definitely recommend. Sorry, a little bit of tangent on certification, but thought that would be important to note. But if you illegally certify delegates, so if you have somebody that you put as a delegate that's not a member or isn't of age or something like that, you can lose up to 25% of your vote allotment. So make sure that you're getting the right people. Okay, let me check how I'm doing on time. Parliamentary procedure, perfect. I was supposed to be here at 3:37, so we're doing great. Or at 7:37. So actually, I'm going to ask a different question than that's on the slide. Can someone explain generally what parliamentary procedure even is, or how you've used parliamentary procedure? If anyone wants to raise a hand, I'll be on the lookout. Robert's rules, yes, thank you, SP Kurt. That's also another version of it. Okay, well, I'll spoil the ending. So parliamentary procedure / Robert's rules, they are different, but for our purposes, the same for now. It's basically how do we run a meeting according to rules that are fair and known to everyone involved. Okay. I am sure that there are a few people on this call who have been in a meeting that has not been efficient, or has not been fun to be a part of, or you are completely confused and don't know why anything was decided. Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure help avoid that, and make sure that we can get through the process in a way that actually yields results. Now, why a candidate should know parliamentary procedure is you are effectively running to become a leader in this organization. And that means that you're going to be speaking during these meetings. And so if you cannot follow parliamentary procedure, then you cannot be heard at those meetings. You might get called out of order. You might not be able to accomplish your job. So that's why each candidate should know. If you are running for president of an organization or head of a committee, like a committee chair, you should definitely know them because you're the one that's going to actually be enforcing them. So that's another aspect that's important to know if you're running for a position that's going to chair meetings, and that should be in your policies and bylaws. You are going to want to know Robert's rules or parliamentary procedure. Oh, that's me. Why Robert's rules matter. So as an officer candidate, again, you have to be participating in these board rules, and because they are usually, I think, 70% of organizations across the world run under Robert's rules, you're going to want to know them. Otherwise, what you're deciding is actually not binding sometimes. Also make sure that everything is efficient. Your elections sometimes take place during meetings. Michigan does not hold them during a meeting, but a lot of other ones would. So you want to make sure that they understand the process. And we also want to make sure that everything is fair, including our elections process. Shameless plug, if you'd like to have a more robust presentation on Robert's rules, that is available on our LMS, our learning management system. It's a presentation I gave about a year and a half ago. So you can watch that for more specific information about Robert's rules. I also did include the handouts from that, I believe are also on the LMS with little cheat sheets about possible motions and ideas for you. So yes, JVC and LMS is the shiz. Yes, I think that JVC probably has one as well, but I know that the LMS one is one that I recorded, so I know it's on there. So quorum is basically, do you have the amount of people needed to conduct business? This is to ensure that you basically don't just get like 3 of your friends together and just like call it JCI Michigan's like elections, and then you guys like vote for stuff and it's not even representative of the members. So you want to make sure that you have enough people present. It's a big thing if you end up not having quorum and you need things done on a deadline. So you want to make sure that that's taken care of. There's the main motion or the motion, which is your proposal to take actions and requires a second before debate. Amendment can modify a motion that before it's voted on, but requires a second. Moving the previous question means I'd like to vote. Sometimes this is helpful if people are just saying the same thing over and over and over again. If 4 people have said, this is too much money, we can't spend $1,000 for a sponsorship, and then the next person says we can't spend $1,000 for sponsorship, the third person might just say, hey, can we move the previous question and send this to a vote, because we're not really getting debate on the other side of this topic. Point of order. So that's if, for example, this happens quite a bit. Point of order, is this person a voting member? Or point of order, how many people do we need to vote on this, right? Or point of clarification, people also sometimes use. Appeal the ruling, which is basically if the chair, if it sounds like 70% of the people said yay and 30% said nay, and the chair says the nays have it, you may also want to call what's called division, which says that the division basically means that the chair has to count the votes again, but you can appeal the ruling of the chair if the chair, let's just say, says that someone can't speak or things like that. Tabling things sets things to the side. Sometimes this happens when we need more information. So there's a proposal for a new event, but we don't know if the city's going to approve our, park permit. So, we may have submitted the budget to the board because we thought we were going to hear back from the city in time. But now the city needs our insurance information, so then you can ask to table voting on the budget until you hear back from the city or something like that. And then you can either say that it's tabled until the next meeting, or you can table it indefinitely, which basically means it's just not going to get addressed unless you basically move to untable it at a different time. And then motion to adjourn, everyone's favorite motion. And it's basically a motion to end the meeting and requires a second and no debate. So again, the only thing I would say about these is that definitely go to the LMS and download the guide that I have, because it literally breaks down the different types of motions, which ones require a second, which ones are debatable or not debatable. So it's super helpful for this. A life cycle of emotions. So basically, usually each chapter has a different way. I've been a part of groups where we have placards. So like JCI USA, we have placards, which are basically pieces of paper with the state's names on it. So you can lift that up. Other chapters, it's just raising your hand. So the member will raise their hand and then make a motion. So I move that we approve the agenda as amended. Okay, so that's what I would like us to do. Then someone else can say that they second, and then the chair will state the motion. So then if I was the chair, I would say there's a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there a second? And someone will say second. And then I say, is there any debate on the motion? If there's no debate, like usually a motion to approve the agenda is not going to have debate, but you still ask because sometimes it does. So then you ask for debate, and then if I don't see any hands, then I'll say, seeing no hands, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, say nay. If you want to get a little spicy, you can. I know in like my local chapter, we say yeah or no. So we allow for a little bit of creativity, but you just have to say what everyone needs to say in order to do that. And then the chair announces the results. So I personally, when I run a meeting, I will say in the ears of the chair, the ayes have it, because it is a voice vote. If it is a hand vote where people raise their hands, I say in the eyes of the chair, the yeas have it. That's just my particular weird thing that I enjoy doing, but I say it really fast. So people have asked me what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. And then I'll say, in the eyes of the chair, the motion passes and the agenda is approved. What I would say about this, I didn't put on the slides, but repeating the motion is really helpful. I have instituted rules like when we've had Zoom meetings that you need to put the motion in the chat if it's longer than 10 words, because your motion should really be what you are asking them to do, not why you are asking them to do it. That is debate. I move to amend the agenda to add this line item, okay? And then if it gets to discussion, you can then say, I'm moving because, this got presented to us. I just got an email about this yesterday and it didn't have time to make it on the agenda. Okay. Don't say, I moved to add this because I just got an email about it. Like, your secretary is going to hate you. Do not do that. Ask for it and then go to debate and then just explain it. Also, like, if you want to hear the debate, you can second it and then go to debate and then ask the person who did the moving, who made the motion, about why they made the motion. So, okay. So what are some examples of motions that could be made during the election, and how would you make them? So again, we can put it either in the chat, or if you want to practice, I can play the chair and you can practice making a motion, but you'd have to raise your hand to be recognized. Okay. Well, I will say one of the ones that is everyone's favorite is motion to cast a unanimous ballot. So this would be a situation where nobody else is running for the position. And so you would move to cast a unanimous ballot, which means that everyone is in agreement with this person becoming that position because nobody is running against them. You can also do that for multiple positions if you have like uncontested directors or something like that. The only thing that is I would caution against that motion is it just takes one person to shoot down that motion because you're motioning for a unanimous ballot. So if for some reason you think it's not going to be unanimous, you maybe don't want to do that motion. So that is a motion that I've seen at elections. Just as an example, again, similar, you can move the previous question to end any debate with the candidate. You could make a motion that the candidate yields to a series of questions, which means you're asking the person who's running if they will answer questions from the floor. So those would be some of the ones that I have seen. So, legal and fiduciary duties. Okay, going a little bit early, I guess. So legal and fiduciary duties. I cannot stress this enough. Running for office is giving yourself legal and financial responsibility. Even if it is your local chapter president, your VP, your treasurer, there's a reason that there's a thing called board insurance. And if you haven't heard of board insurance, I would highly suggest looking into it and deciding if it's right for your chapter. There are a lot of people who have done things with finances or property or assets that they just didn't know what they were doing. They didn't fill out their taxes. They didn't fill out the information that's necessary for the state to keep their organization in good standing. And also, if you're not thinking about these things, you can get sued for basically board negligence and things like that. So, not saying that to scare you away from running, but I'm saying that so that you understand that running for office is a responsibility, not just to do the things that are in your bylaws, but also to follow the rules in your state. Fiduciary responsibility. So means that it is someone who has to act in the best interest of the other party. Here's a good example. If you talk to your cousin Al about should I invest in this cryptocurrency or not, Al probably doesn't have any fiduciary responsibility to you. He's a friend. If you talk to a financial advisor or a certified public accountant, they may have a fiduciary responsibility, which means that they need to act in your best interest. So they shouldn't be just trying to sell you things that are like they know are a scam, right? And so the fiduciary respect for JCI USA is that you are acting in the best interest of our membership, not as you as a person. So you shouldn't be spending money for your own personal benefit that doesn't benefit this organization. You shouldn't be passing things in the budget or the bylaws that's specific benefit to you. Actually, in JCI USA, we make people fill out conflict of interest forms if they're on a board of directors to say that they are not financially benefiting from JCI USA to make sure that we are not putting people in a position where they may be funneling money in a way that's not proper. So the decisions need to be made in the best interest of JCI USA and its members, not your personal interest, and funds must be managed properly and responsibly in accordance with the approved budget. So they should not be extending budget. Because we're a not-for-profit organization, if this isn't followed, if you're not doing things in a manner consistent with your status, again, you can lose the status as a not-for-profit or a nonprofit. And you need to know what those rules are in your state. I think they should both say not-for-profit. So for those who aren't familiar, nonprofits are 501c3s. They have certain benefits like tax exemption statuses, but they also have certain restrictions about what they can and can't do as far as like advocacy and things like that. So the JCI USA Foundation is the 501c3, so a nonprofit. So they have different rules about how their money can be spent. JCI USA is a not-for-profit, which is a 501c4, which is a different tax status, which is not as beneficial tax-wise, but also allows us to do more things because we have that different status. So again, that might be something that if you want to talk to a lawyer in your area, or even, like I said, just some law school professor or some bar associations will offer basic trainings for that. So I'd highly look into that. Officers are indemnified for actions taken in good faith. So indemnified means that like you aren't held legally responsible, but it needs to be taken in good faith within the scope of your authority. So if you are not someone who under your bylaws or policies are allowed to make certain expenditures, then it is not within the scope of your authority and you're going to run into legal issues. And aimed at further defined organization policy, but any willful or malicious acts are not usually covered. And if it's deemed willful or malicious, then that officer can face individual consequences. So long story short, this is also why it's really important that you understand your bylaws and your policies, because you need to understand the scope of your authority and what you can and cannot do to avoid personal liability, which means you getting personally sued, okay? Or your organization getting disbanded or losing their tax status and having to start all over again. So again, not meant to scare you, but meant so that you take this seriously. We have our JCI USA Code of Ethics and Conducts. I know many other organizations have it. I'm sure JCI Michigan has it. That would not surprise me. You guys have had a lot of legal counsels out of there. So I would be surprised if you don't have one. But if you do not follow the Code of Conduct and Ethics, then it can result in disciplinary action being taken. So make sure that you are acting honest and ethically and handling your conflict of interest appropriately, and also you're protecting any confidential information. So if you go into what's called executive session, which means that that's a session where you don't necessarily need to have the minutes available to your general public, then if you violate your confidentiality, then you could be violating your rules of conduct and could have future consequences. So retaliation against reporters is unacceptable. That just goes without being said. People who are disclosing information are looking to fix the problem or to have it addressed, not to have gossip spread. And also, if you start getting in a habit of retaliating against people who report things, then people will stop reporting things and you're really going to lose touch with your membership and credibility with your organization. So we're going to do a fun bylaws and policies scavenger hunt. So I know that Michelle sent out an email on May 28th at 11:34 a.m. my time. So depending on if you're in the Eastern, I think almost all of Michigan, you guys are in the Eastern time zone, yes. But it should be about an hour off of that. So if you guys want to pull up that email, it does have the bylaws and policies updated. Oh, thank you very much. So it's also linked in the chat if you didn't get the email. So I will give you guys a minute to pull those up on your specific devices. And I'll just talk briefly about changing your bylaws while you guys do that, because you can see on here it says revised September 27, 2025. So JCI USA, we have what we call a standing bylaw committee, so it exists all year round. That bylaw committee does consider requests for changes by members. So if you think there's something in the bylaws after you've read them very diligently after this presentation that you would like to have changed, you can submit that to legal counsel Andrew, and the bylaws committee will take that up. And then for bylaws, those need to be approved by our board of directors, well, actually technically our executive committee and our general assembly, but our board of directors usually also approves it. So that means that basically you as a member, as long as you're a delegate, will have a vote on the bylaws. The policies, it goes to the board of directors. So your state president or representative would be the person that does that. After everything is passed, then our legal counsel writes it up and then sends the revised copies out. That's usually not instantaneous. It usually takes a few weeks depending on how many changes were made, but you're going to want to look at the date of the bylaws. So that's also important to note because we've had it more than one time where people have been looking at the wrong version of the bylaws. So make sure that you are looking at the ones closest or confirming with your legal counsel that you have the right one. So I've given you guys about a minute or two to pull up your policies. And since we're a little shy today, we can put the answers in the chat when you find what section of the bylaws it is. So there we go. So what is the maximum a presidential candidate can spend on their campaign after January 1st? And what is excluded from that limit? So you might remember this from my presentation, but I want you guys to practice citing the bylaws. I'm actually going to pull it up on my iPad as well, so it's not cheating. So once somebody has the answer, put it in the chat. Maximum money, yes. So what's the maximum amount that they can spend starting on January 1st? I'll give you a hint. It's in one of the sevens. There he goes. Bylaw 7.9. That's what Bobby Joe says. There you go. $75,000 excludes cost of shipping materials and to convention site. Bylaws 7.9. Good job, Bobby Joe. 1 point for Bobby Joe. I feel like this should be like Jeopardy. Okay. Your state wants to nominate a presidential candidate. Can someone from your state serve on the elections committee, and where does that rule live? So I'll give you guys a minute or two to look that up. Okay, thank you, Megan. $7.7A, Bobby Joe says. Let's see. Okay, I got 7.2, but let's see. Could also be in 7.7A. The other fun thing is like we have to probably specify bylaws or policies, but check 7.7A. 7.7A in the bylaws is a sanctions. Oh, it's 7.2. Okay, perfect. 7.2. Yep. Okay. So good job. There's a line item. Perfect. You're running for MVP. Your state organization has 3 months behind on their dues from the national organization. Can you be certified? And what policy governs this? My goodness. Michelle put lots of these questions in there. So we might breeze through the rest of them. But Bobby Joe is probably close already, hey, and 7.2, I think. So I'll give this answer quick, which is it's policy 7.2, this one. So elections committee shall not recommend candidacy if the candidate state organization is not current with your financial obligations. So how many minutes does an MVP candidate get to address members at the candidate forum? 2. Ding, ding, ding. 2 minutes and introduced by their state president or representative. There has also been discussion about if the state president themselves is running, and then I believe that it goes to the next highest member of the state. But let me check policy 7.12D. So this is literally how it works as legal counsel, is you get asked like these questions like that, which is like, Cassie, I know that it needs to be the president, but I'm the president and I can't introduce myself. So then we pull up the policy and it says during national vice president introductions, each candidate will have 1 minute introduction by their state president / representative. and then 2 minutes to address the members. So we've usually interpreted that to mean the next highest person as well. An executive committee member who's also your close friend wants to hand out campaign buttons at the annual meeting. Is this allowed? And what is that specific rule? The short answer, I'll just accept the short answer and I'll tell you what the bylaw is if you don't have time to look that up. No, thank you. Not allowed. Executive committee members shall not formally endorse a candidate during their years of service, which includes handing out campaign materials. So that is another thing that I would say is like, there is also rules in there about cleaning up your items and only putting out your items during certain periods of time. So you want to make sure that you are following those rules as well. That's also explained during the candidates meeting, which I didn't talk about, but usually we have a meeting the night before, or it's like the Friday of convention, Thursday or Friday of convention, where the candidates basically all meet with the elections committee. The elections committee can review their items and also reminds them of all of the rules that they need to be following. So if you are running for office, make sure that you do that. You want to put a JCI USA shield in your campaign t-shirts. Is this permitted? Again, no, do not put JCI USA, JCI, our logo, shield, old, new, I don't care, neither one. Or any of our other trademark symbols. Again, because you are not running on behalf of JCI USA, you're running to be a candidate for JCI USA. What must they include regardless of regarding campaign finances? A tentative budget. We didn't talk about this at the first step, but it's going to 7.5. Yes, all travel fees. Yes, thank you, Bobby Joe. Yeah, you want to make sure that you get your budget in on time. This is, I can tell you, at least when I was legal counsel, my committee like poured over the budgets. They were like matching up receipts to all of the budget expenses, calling out people who had that. Can any of those campaign materials have lower than JSA USA symbols? That is a great question. Let me pull up. What did we say that rule was? Boop, boop, boop. Policy 7-12N. So that policy says campaign material must not include JCI USA's logo, shield, or other JCI USA trademarked symbols. So I would say that as a strict reading of that, I don't think it is directly prohibited. That would obviously be left to the elections committee to determine that. But I would caution that a lot of times the local chapters are using JCI or JCI USA branded things like the shield or like the new shield. So if for some reason yours was like nothing like that, like it was like an apple or like a unicorn, I don't know if you have a really fun thing. Like my chapter, it is a German guy with a thing of beer and a brat. So like that is not anything close to JCI USA's logo and probably would not be mistaken for JCI USA's logo. But I would definitely clear that through elections committee. Obviously use caution, but not an immediate rule breaking. Yes. So I would get it cleared by them, but I think a strict reading of that doesn't exclude it. But if it incorporated it into your local chapter, I would not do that. So good question. See, I have questions that I haven't even had to have an answer for. So I am going to have you guys do this one because this one's a little bit interesting. So bonus question. A state has 8 local chapters in good standing and an average of 251 individual members over the last 2 years. How many votes does this state are they entitled to during the election? And I'm going to give you the policy number so that we can actually do the math. So it's bylaw 16.4. It's not in the 7s, and so it was going to take you guys a little bit longer to find it. Okay, Kurt's locking in with 12. Thumbs up, Kurtz, if you think he's right. Or if you think he's wrong, give it a thumbs down. 16.4. Let me scrolly. Okay, Kurt, you're not getting any thumbs up or thumbs down. Nobody knows if they agree with you or not. So we'll give you the answer. Drum roll for Kurt. 12. Huzzah! So here's how we came up with that. You have the 5 base votes plus 4 votes because 8 chapters divided by 2, and then 3 votes for the membership. So 12 votes total. Oh, Bobby Joe thinks 13. Well, remember, voting strength uses the average of the 2 most recent year ends. Okay. So we did leave about 23 minutes for questions. If you guys, that's okay, Bobby Joe. If you guys have any questions, or if you guys just want any tips on like running a meeting or dealing with bylaws, you guys have had some good questions that I have not encountered before. So I'm obviously down to continue that conversation if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, if we don't, then we'll wrap up. We'll give you guys a minute or two. Just raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Okay, see none. Thank you all so much for coming. I know that there are at least, I think, 2 other schools classes that are coming up. So I highly recommend that you attend those as well to round yourself out. Thank you, DeMarcus. Also, as parliamentarian, if you do want me to present to your group, I know I'm volunteering myself for more work, but that's what we do as JCIA leaders, right? If you do want me to step in and help with that, I have, when I was legal counsel, met with groups about their bylaws and things like that. So I can always help with that. And also, other shameless plug is that I do the advocacy task force, and we also have our training on that. I was trying to find my answer instead of voices. Where's the policy for leaving votes uncast? That is a great question. I don't think that there's a specific policy on it. It's just more of a, I'm going to get into the weeds for a second, so I hope you don't mind. So there is the ability to what's called have a vote of no confidence, which means that you don't need to cast votes. A vote of no confidence, I will tell you, I've been a part of a vote of no confidence. It's a pretty extreme thing to do, which is basically saying that you don't want that person, even if there is no other option. So again, that's a pretty serious thing to do, but you don't need to cast all of your votes. So if your group, let's just say, has the 12 votes available and you have someone who does not wish to vote, they can purposefully say that they're abstaining. Basically, it's like an abstention. Would be kind of how I would classify it. So that's why it's not necessarily a policy that says you cannot vote, but it's just an abstention from voting for a candidate. So that has happened in the past, but again, usually most people will cast their votes, especially in a contested election, but it is an option available to you if you would like. Okay. Anything else? Okay, great. Well, have fun. Good luck. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll put my contact information in the chat. So.